Hey, my 20%, my people, I hope you're doing well. And just want to share something with you. There's a story that I read several years ago now in a book by Mark Batterson. But what has kind of brought this to bear again today is in my own devotions. I'm in Matthew, and I'm kind of in the middle of the Gospel of Matthew. And in Matthew 15:14, Jesus says something really powerful. He is the disciples kind of come to Jesus and they say, the Pharisees are going to get upset with what you're saying. And so instead of Jesus thinking, oh, I don't want that to happen, Jesus pushes and he says, I don't care if they get upset. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. But he does say, this is almost a direct quote in Matthew 15:14, he does say, they are blind guides. They are blind guides. And when the blind lead the blind, both fall into a pit. Now, I want you to know that what you do in leadership absolutely matters. Because Jesus seems to indicate that those of us who are willing to try at least to keep our eyes open and try to lead with the best of intentions and try to listen to God, and we don't always do it perfectly, I understand that, but those of us who are leading and trying to influence in a way that's beneficial, Jesus seems to indicate that that is so crucial and so important if those who are following are ever going to get to where they're going and not fall into a pit. See, I think that there are two ways to misuse the position of leadership. Two ways to misuse it. So first of all, and I think this is what Jesus is saying in Matthew 14, you can abuse the position. So you can lay way too much weight on people. You can demand things of them that they can never actually provide for you or provide for themselves, and then you can lay a guilt on them. So you can abuse the position of leadership. But I think there's another way to blindly lead, and that is to refuse the position of leadership. You can abuse it or you can refuse it. Both of those, because listen, if God has called you to lead, then somebody's following you. If God has put you in a position of influence, then somebody's watching you. And so it's not a matter of will I or won't I, it's a matter of will I do it right or will I do it wrong. And that doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but I believe it does mean you have to be intentional. So there's a story that Mark Batterson tells in his book, Play the Man. And he talks about a congressman from Texas named Sam Rayburn. Now, this reaches back to the late 1800s throughout the 1900s. But Rayburn was the longest tenured Speaker of the House in American history. He spent 17 years as the Speaker of the House of Representatives. He spent 24 terms in Congress. That's 48 years in Congress. And for those 17 years, and especially on into those years, Sam Rayburn was considered by many to be the most powerful man in Washington, D.C. All of Rayburn's story, though, begins in this really unique place. So he grew up poor. He was born in Tennessee, but when he was very young, his parents moved him to Texas. And so he kind of grew up and lived with his family in a place called Flat Springs, I think it was. Flat Springs, Texas. And there he had 10 siblings, and they worked on a 40-acre cotton farm. And they didn't have much money at all. Like, they didn't have any extra money at all. Well, Rayburn, when he was 18 or 19 years old, he was going to go to college at I think it was East Texas Normal College is the name of the place. Had never heard of it before. East Texas Normal, like it's called Normal College. I don't even know what to make of that. But anyway, so his father was taking him to the train station where Rayburn had scraped together enough money to buy a train ticket to get him to the school. And so his father led him there, and there wasn't that much conversation. His father was a hardworking man, had raised 11 kids, had worked, and basically didn't have anything to his name other than the fact that he had kept these kids alive, had fed them, and had kept a roof over their head. So when they got to the train station, Rayburn and his father were sort of in this awkward moment, and his father reached into his pocket and brought out this handful of cash and shoved it at his son, Sam. Sam said, when I saw that money in his hand that he was handing to me, he said, something in me broke. So because I knew, at that age especially, he said, I knew my father didn't have any extra money. I knew my father didn't have anything other than the money that filled our bellies with food and kept that roof over our head. And he said, I thought to myself, what in the world must he have given up? What in the world must he and my mother have not gotten or not done? Or how much had they gone without so that he could hand me? And it turned out it was $25. All the money that Rayburn's father had. But in that moment, something shifted in Sam Rayburn. There was a moment of shaping that took place in his life that he never ever forgot. As he got onto that train, his father told him 4 words. I love this. He just, so simple, man, a few words, but Rayburn never forgot it. His father looked at him as Sam was getting onto that train. He said, "Sam, be a man." That was it. And within those 4 words, that's not a gender-specific term either. He's saying, "Sam, I want you to be honorable. I want you to do everything you can do. I want you to know where you came from, but I want you to not be limited by that." And with that, Sam Rayburn went off. He would end up both going to school and teaching school. And then he went on, obviously, to be the longest serving Speaker of the House in American history in Washington, D.C. So in that story, it's a beautiful story, right? But in that story, there are these 2 things that I just want to tell you that I think apply to our lives. Now, Batterson kind of applied it in a couple of ways, but there was it's just some things that I took from that story that I want to share with you. First of all, I wrote these down, so I'm just looking down at my note here. Sometimes we will go without, so we will have something to give. Sometimes we have to go without if we want to have something to give. When his father gave him that money, Rayburn knew that someone had sacrificed so that he could have something. Part of the reason that moment was so important to him was because his father revealed that long before Sam ever knew anything that his father was doing on his behalf, his father was doing something on his behalf. The moment of revelation was not the moment of sacrifice. The moment of revelation told a story about days, weeks, and months that his dad had gone without so that he could have something to give to his son when he got onto that train and went off to school. As leaders and as influencers, I want you to be clear. We go without sometimes so that we will have something to give. Sometimes I go without some sleep because I'm going to pray a little bit more because I desperately want to have something to give to the people of Fair Forest. Sometimes as a father, Nisha and I can tell you, she is a mother, we as parents, sometimes there are some things we do not purchase. There are some things we do not choose to do. There are sometimes we don't eat out. There's some meals that we skip because we know that there's a vacation coming or we're saving money for something that we want the kids to have. And I tell you, sometimes we have to go without if we want to have something to give. And that's not that I'm sacrificing because I'm beating myself into submission. You know, there was this old group of people in the church well over a millennia ago called the Flagellists. And they would beat themselves with whips. They would whip their own back because they believed that they needed to pay penance for the sins that they carried and the sins of the world so that God would be pleased with them. That is not what this is at all. For one thing, that's a dreadful theology. It doesn't allow Jesus to be the sacrifice of our lives. It doesn't allow him to take on the punishment of sin. It means that we have to keep taking the punishment of sin that Jesus did not take. That's a foolish and false doctrine. It's not true. It's not right. It's not biblical. But the idea, though, is that sometimes I think we can fall into that same mindset where we think, oh, I'm giving up so much because I've got to, if I'm not in pain, then my kids aren't doing it right. If I don't have, if I'm not tired and weary, then my family's not going to. No, we don't just sacrifice so that we can be in pain and then make ourselves out to be some kind of living martyr. Sometimes we go without if we're doing it right because we know that there's coming a moment when somebody's going to have a need. And so I'm not really going without as much as I'm saving something for them. And sometimes you pray a little bit more. Sometimes you read a little bit more even when you don't want to. Some of you don't like to read. That's okay. Keep reading some stuff. Sometimes you get there a little bit earlier. Sometimes you stay a little bit later. Sometimes you pray with that person in the altar a little bit longer. Sometimes you take the phone call when you don't want to take the phone call, even though you're tired, even though you've got so much going on. Sometimes you do it. Sometimes you go without what you want so that you can have something to give to those people who are in desperate need, who need a moment, who need to know that somebody's been working on my behalf before this moment ever happened. So that's first. Sometimes we will have to go without in order to have something to give someone. Sam Rayburn's father saved and went without so he could give him that $25. And Rayburn's life was never the same. But second, the second piece is this. Never underestimate the power of a strategic moment. Life is made up of moments. And so every time you're interacting with people, every time you're talking to your kids, every time you're laying hands on someone in prayer, every time you are paying attention to someone instead of just walking past them, can I tell you, those moments absolutely matter. A moment that might not seem like a big deal. Dad was just driving his son to the train station. He gave him $25. In the grand scheme of all that Rayburn would have access to, he would be in control of budgets that would be hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars at that point in time, early in American history. He would also have the ability to, as Speaker of the House, he controlled what bills came to the floor. He was amazing at getting filibusters started and sustaining them if there was something that he believed didn't need to pass through the House. He absolutely had control over so much stuff over the course of his political career, but so much of it, he would say, went back to that moment when his father said, "Son, be a man," and he gave him $25. That moment shaped a life. Can I tell you, I don't think you and I know exactly what moments are going to shape lives, which means there is a responsibility that we have to each moment. That doesn't mean if we make a mistake, we've lost. It just means that when we pay attention to the moments God's giving us, because there are some moments when God shows up for us in tangible ways that if he hadn't, faith might have been lost. If he hadn't, joy might have been lost. If he hadn't showed up, peace might have been lost. If he hadn't come in just in the nick of time, if he hadn't showed up when he showed up, if he hadn't spoken that when he spoke it, if he hadn't put that person in your life and my life that were there in that rocky, thorny, stormy season, man, we might have a very different story to tell about our own life, because those moments matter. And I want you to be empowered. I don't want you to feel an unnecessary burden. I want you to be empowered that when you shake that hand, when you say hello, when you stop walking and say, "Hey, how are things going in your life?" When you start to open some of those doors in people's lives who are watching you, looking at you, honoring you, loving you, those people who look up to you and say, "Man, I wish I could be like them." Because can I tell you, there are people who are looking at you that way. And if you don't believe that, please, can I just be here to tell you, don't be so naive. If I'm sending you this video, I believe people are watching you. I believe people are looking at you differently. And that's why I'm sending this to you. And that means that those moments matter. Sometimes we go without, so we will have something to give. And we have to remember that every moment has the potential to be that moment in someone's life. It is a powerful responsibility. But I believe fully as a Christian that comes with a powerful grace. I don't believe God ever sends us to a place without equipping us for that place. And that means that every person you're going to talk to this week, every person you're going to see if you're here Wednesday night or Sunday morning at the church, if you're in the checkout line at Publix, if you're on the phone with somebody who's hurting, if you're weeping with someone because of what they're going through, I do not believe that moment has happened by accident. And I do not believe that moment does not come fully equipped by God with the grace that you need to give them something that they need and to make the most of that strategic moment. I fully believe it. And I think if we'll live that way, if we'll keep on saving a little bit through discipline and determination, I believe we'll have more to give than we think we have to give. And if we will keep seeing moments as strategic moments in people's lives that could literally change the course of someone's existence, then I think we'll stop treating moments like they're not worth anything. And we'll start seeing the beauty and the value and the treasure that God has built into every single second of our day. You're not in a meaningless place. You're not in a fruitless season. You are in the place where God has you, surrounded by the people he has surrounding you for such a time as this. I hope that presses a little bit, because I just think that there's so much more for us. I just think there's so much more influence that is beneficial and fruit producing. And I cannot wait to see what God's going to do through your life, through my life, through that little extra we're going to do, through those moments that we're going to make the most of. It could literally change the people in your household, the people at this church, the people in your sphere of influence, the people in the city. I do not believe that there's anything that God's leading us to by accident. So let's be ready for it. And let's make the most of it when it gets here. I love you all. Blessings.